Oh, what a weird day. Weird energy today. Partial solar eclipse in Aquarius. But anyway, I was thinking of what to talk about today, what I was going to make the video about. And what I thought of is something that I've only recently been thinking about. Recently being in the last couple of years, really. So it's kind of still developing these ideas, but it has to do with something that you commonly hear. It's a common saying that relationships are actually a mirror to yourself. Like, relationships are a reflection of yourself. That may sound obvious, just like common sense, but this is something that I'm thinking deeper and deeper and deeper to. And I want to talk about it on multiple levels, from like the mundane, kind of obvious ways that that's true, to the highest, like, psychic connection and telepathy that, happens. And just to start off with some background, relationships are a really funny thing, because for me, I didn't realize until late in life, like recently, in the last couple of years, that is like a domain in life that might be important to concentrate on. Like, for instance, like from 11 years old and onwards, through my teens, through my early adulthood, I was obsessed with music. That's all I thought about all the time. Music theory, different styles, techniques, what kind of gear I was going to buy, what I was going to work on, what I was going to do. And of course, relationships were always something that were happening. And to clarify, in this video, I'm talking about close personal relationships. The superficial relationships of people you interact with on a daily basis, or at the checkout counter, or your work relationships that might be superficial, where you aren't getting really to know somebody, where you really know them and you see all sides of them. That's what I'm talking about here. There's other interesting aspects and exchanges that happen with these superficial relationships, and I'd like to talk about that at some time, but right now I'm talking about when you're in it with somebody and you really get to know them. So relationships were always something that just kind of happened to me. They were happening in the background of my life. Like, you have a girlfriend, you have whatever. And I think this is true for a lot of people, because we're born into relationships. Like, as soon as you're born, you have close relationships with your parents, with your family. It's something that's always there, so it's very easy to take them for granted. It's always there, and so it just seems so there that it's just a fact of life, an aspect of life. I think it's not common. Well, I don't know. For me, it wasn't something I would think about as if music, or something I can work on with music, or making money, or these other domains of life. Relationships were like a side dish. You know what I mean? It's something that happened into the background. And it wasn't until in the last, 5 to 8 years or something, that stuff started happening in my relationships that started dominating my life. It kind of took over my life, and it became the main focus, and it forced me to realize that there's something to this. This is extremely important. You have to work on your relationships, or else, if you work on your relationships, you can enhance life and get the best out of life. That's where the best of life lies. Truly, if you think about it, you can make all the money in the world. You can get all the power in the world. You can get all the abundance in the world. If you have nobody to share it with, there's not really any point. Relationships are where the meat lies in life. So, or conversely, they can totally mess up your life. That's pretty apparent. Humans can do horrible stuff to each other. Horrible stuff. And it can mess up your life really bad. So this is something that's extremely important to work on, to think about, that's what I want to talk about today. And something that in all the intense stuff that's been happening in my relationships. And really, I can look back and say Saturn was transiting Libra, which I have a lot of planets in, including my sun, and I can't stop talking about astrology. My last video, I said I was gonna move it to another channel, but I know I can't stop talking about it. I'm obsessed with it. So, Libra was transiting Libra, then Saturn was transiting Libra, then it transited Scorpio. This is all relationships aspects, and like my life just, that became the main focus, and it still is, and I'm still learning almost frantically. And it's not that I'm super bad at relationships. I'm a good communicator. I'm very empathetic. I can put myself in other people's shoes, but still, there's rough spots. And in that, something I'm seeing, this is what I want to talk about. It's coming up in the weirdest ways. It freaks me out when I see this now, that relationships are a reflection of yourself. They're a mirror of yourself. Especially very close relationships, the way that you're interacting, you think you're seeing the other person, but you're seeing an aspect of yourself. And so let me talk about what I mean by this. All right, on the most obvious level, well, first, let's just start with this. No matter how close you get with someone and how much you talk with them and how intimately you get to know them, and you know personal details that no one else would know about them, and you see them go through all their phases and all their moods, you can truly never know another person. That may sound extreme, that may also sound depressing, but it's just a fact. At a certain level, we are all separate. On another level, we're all one. We're all the same. We're all the same aspect of something. Whether you want to call it God, source, the universe, whatever. It helps to remember that. And there's ways to see that too, but as far as like in the physical dimension, on the mundane level, we're fundamentally separate. And what I mean by this is that when you're interacting with someone, and even though, let's say, you're really good at empathizing, in other words, you can take different types of people and you have a really good ability to put yourself in their shoes and like imagine what it would be like to be them and be in a given situation or whatever. Remember that no matter what, that is still a simulation going on in your mind. You cannot truly, really know them. Or here's another way. When someone's communicating to you and they're saying something to you and they're trying to make you understand something, you're hearing what they're saying, but you cannot truly ever really know what they're saying. Well, you cannot truly ever really understand what someone's saying, even if it's simple. Because they're saying it from a certain place and they mean a certain way and they're feeling a certain way when they say it. All you can do is hear, and your understanding is a simulation in your mind about what they mean. Think about that, because it's true and that's deep. Because of that, because all you can ever do when someone's communicating and you're trying to understand what they're saying is kind of run a simulation in your mind, and that's based off your experience. It's based off your knowledge and your perceptions and your ability to run the simulation. It's all you. Does that make sense? So it's always a reflection of you. And here's an example. Like, for instance, let's say, I'm in a relationship and I get in a little, there's some conflict, there's a little argument about something, and we're texting, all right? And the other person sends a bunch of texts. Let's say they send like 25 texts. They're emotional. They really want to express themselves. Isn't it funny? Notice this in yourself too, that they're saying all kinds of stuff. They're saying multiple points. They're expressing multiple feelings, they're doing multiple things. But typically what people will do is pick out one thing, the one thing that affects them, and they latch onto that. Here's a really good example. If you're an iPhone user and you have your iPhone updated to the latest operating system, in the texting application, you can like go to individual text and like text or put a question mark, or you can highlight text. So that happened the other day, and that's what made this go off in my brain a little bit more, is that out of all those texts, there was one that really affected me, and I highlighted it. And what I'm seeing is that you always have a filter. You always have a filter. For instance, humans are full spectrum. It's what our mind wants to do, our ego. It's making us easier for us to function in reality, and which is unbelievable complexity. It's like chaos for real. It's like Pisces chaos all the time. But what happens is our ego filters it out and makes it nice, a little bit more cleaner and simple for our minds to get around. So you do that with people too, and it's very easy to like characterize people. We're doing this all the time. Everybody, you meet someone new, and think about how your mind immediately makes generalizations, and it's the hugest generalizations. Oh, this is this type of person. This person is this, and they probably are like this and this. That's the mind simplifying reality, because in truth, every individual human is a full spectrum. It's just like a full spectrum electromagnetic radiation of the reds and the purples and the blues and the yellows all the time. They have all different moods. They all have all different modes they get in. They have all different characters that they get in, most of them. But what happens is that we tend to filter out that. And for instance, let's say in your relationship, your partner, a lot of the time they're telling you things that they love you, and they're telling you positive things and good things and stuff like that. But sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes they're like, oh, I hate you, or I'm so mad at you, or negative things. If you this is what I find about myself. If you fixate on something critical or negative that someone says, to where you're, oh, no, you did not just call me blah, blah, blah. And it's a big deal for you, that's a reflection of you. That's a reflection of you. Because they're saying all kinds of stuff. What you pick and choose to fixate on is a reflection of you. That's one example of how it really helps to start seeing your close personal relationships as a mirror. It's a mirror of yourself. If you're insecure and highly susceptible to criticism, where essentially if someone's mad at you or they're saying that you made a mistake and you freak out about that, another word for that is insecurity, right? But what tends to happen is that you'll get outraged and you focus on them. You know what I mean? You focus on them and you want to say, that's not right. There's no way you can say that. And you want to argue about it and stuff. And that's where conflict comes from. But maybe think about it's you in the first place. That it was the part of you inside you that doesn't love yourself. That you're hating on yourself, and that's why you picked out that one thing and fixated on it and needed to argue about it. It's because you're hating on yourself. You know what I mean? Relationships are a mirror. They're a total mirror to yourself, especially close personal relationships. What you see in the other person is what you see in yourself. Or conversely, it can also be totally what you don't see. It can be all this stuff you won't look at in yourself that you repress, because if you were set up differently, You might only hear when they are saying loving, positive stuff, and when they're critical, that's the stuff that just flies by. Now, this is not that simple, because in another video, I talked about the negativity bias. You know, that figures into it. All humans are watching out for pain. We don't want painful things, and we are highly on guard against it, right? And fear. And so, again, if your partner is a full spectrum human being, which is a good thing to have the whole range. You don't want someone that's monotone. And what if, if someone's only this one character and all they talk about is love and stuff like that? I mean, that's great, but how long is that gonna, how many weeks can you're talking about love again? Like, can we talk about something else? Everyone's a full spectrum human being. Even if it's not so visible, we must know that they are on the inside a full spectrum human being. Maybe they're just repressing aspects and censoring aspects, That's something I like to think. And let's bump up to the next level of how relationships are a reflection of yourself, because like I said, we're all separate, but we're all the same. I like to think of this because I've always had this feeling that humans are all the same. We all have the same potential. Now, that can be arguable. You can say, oh, well, you didn't grow up in a horrible childhood and family situation, or you didn't have a disability, or you don't have this genetic predisposition. And I mean, all that is true, but I mean, on a fundamental level, we have the same degree of blueprint. You know what I mean? That may be way too out there to talk about, but it's very easy to simplify other people and generalize and categorize them, and think of them as, oh, that's that type of person. He or she is one of those, It's not the case. They're more like you than you know. I mean, for real, think about that. They're more like you than we are even realizing. That you might not see it on the surface. They might be completely conditioned or practiced in censoring an aspect of themselves. Maybe they're not even in touch with it, but it's there deep down, and it's just something that this isn't fully formed in my brain, and it's not structured, and I knew that if I talk about this, it wouldn't be planned out, and I wouldn't really know what to say, because this is something that I'm seeing. It keeps popping up. There's times where I will be arguing, since I can't stop talking about astrology, I'm a Venus and Virgo, okay, but still I have that Libra sun, I have a Pisces moon. It's I can be extremely empathetic, where other people's pain affects me greatly, and I just want to help people, and I can put myself in other shoes in a really weird way. I think it's that Pisces aspect, because this is another way to think about the higher level I just talked about. Pisces is an interesting sign because one way to look at the zodiac is an evolutionary process. Starting from Aries, where you get to the next level, and each sign has its main thing it's focusing on, that it's learning. When you get to Pisces, it contains all the other ones. It's like all the other ones. So you almost can be like a shapeshifter, and I know what it's like to be, a homeless, drug addict living on the street. Even though I've never really done that, somehow I can really imagine what that would be like and feel like. I have that ability, but there's also aspects that I explain with my chart. It's just a way to conceptualize it, if you want to think about it that way. That, there's a Venus in Virgo, there's a Jupiter in Virgo, there's Saturn in Libra, and I can be very critical. I can get into a mode where I'm very critical and I'm microscopically focusing on things, and that's this time is bringing that out, you know, in everybody, I think. But when I do that, and I go on and on and on, and if someone's resisting, you know, the person I'm with, if they're like get offended and like, you're not going to talk to me that way, you stop criticizing me, which is normal. I tend to be like, no, you don't understand, this is not okay, blah blah blah, and I'll go on and on and on. Well, whether that's right or wrong, and who's right or wrong, and if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because Venus in Virgo, it does lead to improvement and like clarification. And when I say Venus in Virgo, I'm talking about an energy, like a modality. In other videos, I talked about how I'm an optimizer. I like to take things and make them better, and that tends to what happens in myself, in my relationships, and the things I do in life. It's looking with a critical eye and saying, could be better, you know, and then talking about it and processing, and then it gets better, you know what I mean? And I think that's like an important thing in the world, that everybody should embody now and then, you know, in whatever aspect. In other videos I talked about that. For me, it was music. Like, if you're not ever looking at yourself critically and with an analytical eye, you're just content to kind of stay the same, or you progress randomly in a chaotic fashion. If you can work on your weak spots, you can improve rapidly and in the ways that you want, like in a conscious, intentful way. So, tangent right there, but the problem is like sometimes I get in that mode, and you know, it's not that I don't like it about myself. I don't like the tone that I take on when I do that. But what is weird about it, and I've only seen this recently, like in the past year, sometimes I will go on like a rant, you know, about, it's like a critical rant, and then somehow, it might be later in the day, it might be the next day, it might be 3 days later, and something might happen to me to change my consciousness, but something happens, and I look back on it, and I'm like, dude, you were talking about yourself. All that stuff that you were complaining about is what you're hating on yourself or scared of being like in yourself. It's either something you've repressed that you're like, oh, that's a dark aspect to me of humanity, and I reject that out of myself, and then I can only see it in other people and criticize them for it. You know what I'm saying? Or it's stuff that you are aware of yourself and you're constantly hating on yourself for, and that you're just vibrating at that level, and just you're ready to pop and say, you know what, you're a critical person, you know, and you just. So it's important to realize that more than we know, other people are a reflection of yourself. Again, because you're only seeing what you can see in people. There's so much in a person that you're not seeing because of your own filter or your own lack of knowledge or experience. You know, whatever they're saying, you think that you're understanding them and you think you're interpreting it, but it's obvious that someone can say a very simple sentence and it can be wildly misinterpreted. That happens in yourself, in the simulation you just ran to try to figure out what they mean. That's all you. So if you're pointing at someone and you're criticizing them, you're kind of in a way criticizing yourself. You know what I mean? It's a reflection of yourself. You can't produce those words. Here's another idea I thought. Because this happened in an argument too. And like, a lot of times all humans have trouble taking responsibility. For instance, let's say you do criticize someone. You know, you say something that's kind of hurtful. And they tell you that. They're like, dang, you just hurt the crap out of my feelings. Like, you just hurt my feelings really bad, blah, blah, blah. What do most people tend to do right there? They're like, oh, well, you know, here's my excuse. I mean, I was justified. Like, you know, they're gonna, people tend to get defensive and say, well, I criticized you, but, you know, really what that came from, and what they'll tend to do is like, you gave me a reason to criticize you. And that may or may not be true. That's not the point. It could totally be true. It could totally be justified. My point is, it's an absolution, if that's even a word, of responsibility. Because what comes out of your mouth is totally you. No one ever makes you say anything. You know, this is important because lots of people say this all the time. It's a Taylor Swift song right now. You look what you made me do. No, there's no such thing as that. Anything you do is all you. You know, any decision you make is all you. Anything you say is all you. Why? Because this is a fundamental point I wanted to get to in this video. At any moment, whether it's you talking and what's coming out of your mouth, or whether it's how you're interpreting, like my example where someone will send you 20 texts, but you only focus on that one negative one, and that you're off and running, and that your whole thing is based on that one text, and you miss all the other stuff. Whether either of those are happening, I want to point out that in any given moment, you have an infinite choice of what you could say. You know, in any given moment, if you're receiving another person, you're reading their text, or you're receiving their vibe, there's an infinite way that you can interpret that. You could see all the good stuff. You could see a 90% good, 10% bad, 80% good, 20%. There's an infinite way to interpret reality. There's an infinite way to express yourself. And if you're in a conflict or a discussion or whatever, at any given moment, there's an infinite number of ways you could choose to handle it or choose what to say. Whatever you do say is all you. That's all on you, you know? However you decide to interpret a person in any given moment is all on you. That's why relationships are a mirror to yourself. And for that reason, that's why they're extremely transformative. They can be. That's why they can be so intense. That is where your greatest opportunity lies to work on yourself, because it's a mirror unto yourself. If you had no one to bounce stuff off on, you would always stay the same, wouldn't you? You know, you wouldn't proceed, you wouldn't transform, you wouldn't learn. It comes from relationships. And this mentality can really, really help. It's very, very easy to focus on the other person, and you can go through the whole day as like, I can't believe they did that. How can they say that? You know what? Blah blah blah. And you have arguments in your head, and you feel disempowered, like they have all the control. They have all the control over you, but it's all you. It's all you. It's how you're interpreting. If you're bent out of shape about it, and the whole day you're bummed out about someone's said, look inside yourself. You're probably hating on yourself in that exact same area, or you have probably, out of disgust or terror or whatever, taken that part of yourself that's there, but repressed it, saying that's not me for sure, you know. And then you're highly susceptible to that area. If someone touches that button, you're like, oh, don't open that box. So relationships are a mirror to yourself. If you're experiencing stuff like that, it helps to start looking at yourself and saying, what is it in me that makes me susceptible to criticism? You know, am I hating on myself all the time? And I bet if you look and start to be self-aware, you'll see that you're hating on yourself all the time. In certain areas, maybe. That's very important, because that's how cycles start in relationships, and how things get escalated and stuff like that. You think it's the other person, and if you're like freaking out, like, how can you criticize me for that? and it escalates, and simultaneously what you're doing is thinking that they have control over you. Like when you say, how can you do that? You cannot be allowed to say that to me. Really what you're saying is like, you have total power over me, you know? Which is not true, because that's coming from inside you. It's not coming from them. You remember that humans are full spectrum. Humans are saying all kinds of stuff all the time. It's you that decides to latch on one thing over another thing. So, you know, I think that's really important at this time. Valentine's Day was yesterday. We have this eclipse conjunct Mercury right now. I think that's going to bring this kind of stuff out. And relationships are always a huge part in most people's life. And they were in mine, but like I didn't see that for a long time. I just thought it's something that kind of happens. You know, you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or you have a family, you have these people that you're around at work, and it's just, it is what it is. Until it started causing problems for me, I didn't ever think about it. It's like, no, this is like an important domain of life that you can really focus on and try to improve. Try to improve and work on it. And like we've arrived at today, it's about working on yourself, you know? It doesn't mean you need to, you know, communicate to other people to help them learn about themselves, and maybe they can improve how they communicate and talk and be less critical and stuff like that. But really, the most improvement is going to come from it's always you. This is true not just for your relationships, but it's really like your relationship to reality, to this physical dimension, to the world. It is all you. This is like a law of attraction perspective. And like, this is a video I want to get another video. I want to do eventually, but for now, try to think of that during this time, that reflections are a mirror of yourself. I mean, relationships are a mirror of yourself, they're reflections. So see if that helps, see what that does. All right, thanks, I'll see you another time. Okay, well, I wanted to do a little addendum to that because I thought of some other stuff, but also I want to see if I can splice together two videos in my editing software, which I haven't ever tried, and also do some color correction and see what that does. But I was thinking, like, okay, I'm talking about if relationships are like, if it's all you, you know, that's basically what we're saying. What about when someone, like, people can be very hurtful. They can say like very, very hurtful things, and the better they know you, they know right where your spots are. They know exactly what to say to really hurt you. People can be very cruel to each other, and no one likes that. No one wants that, you know. So I thought about that. I was like, well, is that really fair? If we're saying that it's all you, like if you take something personally, that it's a reflection of where you're hating on yourself inside. What about when someone says something really, like, really hurtful intentionally? There's mean people out there. There's abusive people out there. There's people out there that are physically abusive, and people can do all kinds of unimaginably horrible stuff to each other. What about that? How could that be your fault? Well, let's examine that. And we cannot really do this I can't do this without getting into the law of attraction perspective. And this is something that always comes up. Like, if you're creating your reality, and if it is a reflection of you, and if it's like you're taking criticism personally or something hurtfully, what about when something really bad happens? Like, how is that your fault? If you're in an abusive situation, how is it, you know, if someone's like trying to control you and keep you in this situation where maybe they're verbally or physically abusive, how is that a reflection of yourself? How is that a fault? Well, I can only attest to this by myself, my own experience in times in my life where I guess what you would call it is like victim mentality. And that sounds like intense, like kind of a dirty word, like victim mentality. But really what that is going around saying, I can't believe these people doing this to me all the time. Why do people have to be this way? I can't believe these people that expect me to blah, blah, blah. It's like, I can't stand this anymore. How can they do this? Blah, 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 blah. What you're saying is that they're all doing it to you and you have no power to stop. Someone who wasn't in victim mentality wouldn't even think that way. They would be like, oh, that sucks. This sucks. I got to do something. And they would do something to change it. And most of us really have the power to do that. And it's the fact that if we don't do that, if we give our power away and say that someone else has the control, that we're a victim, meaning it's passively happening to us, like someone saying something really crummy, right? If we say, oh, I'm just stuck in this situation, and someone's saying something crummy, that's not really true. If you're not in that mentality, the crummy thing would be said, but then you would take action to, not be in that situation. So, like, it still is a reflection of yourself. It still is a reflection of yourself. And this gets controversial because there's many people that really are kind of stuck in really bad situations. But I think it also goes back to childhood, because this is why childhood is such a formative time, and why so many of our issues as adults and in our relationships come from childhood experiences. Because when you are a child, you are kind of powerless. If you're in an abusive situation, you don't have the power to leave. You don't have the resources. You don't have the knowledge or experience, and you are kind of stuck and susceptible and being exposed. So that can remain. That feeling of powerlessness can remain well into the time when you have total control and total power. But that's kind of what I'm saying, is be aware. Are you giving your power away? Even let's take it down to just the regular old criticism, like some little passive aggressive comment. I'm sure when I start getting viewers, if I ever do on this YouTube channel, that there's always going to be trolls and there's always going to be critical people. And like I've said in other videos, it's like, I know myself and I have astrological placements that make me susceptible to a degree to stuff like that. Criticism, I tend to take it pretty, and I'm already trying to start preparing myself for that. Like, how if someone just rips the shreds out of me, I'm just to get up and make another video, and I don't want it to affect me. I don't want it to influence the content of my video. I just want to be myself like I always am, like I am right now. I don't want the audience to kind of influence what I'm doing, especially in a negative way. Whatever level that is, whether it's straight up abuse, whether it's just passive aggressive comment, you're susceptible from that victim mentality, that, oh, I'm stuck in this situation and like I can't control what they say and they shouldn't be allowed to say that. People you can't control, but you control yourself. If it's like, you have to know innately. In other words, you have to know yourself. You have to accept yourself. If there's parts of yourself that you don't accept and you're internally criticizing yourself, that's exactly where you're going to freak out if you hear someone say the same thing. This happens to me all the time because I'm intensely self-critical. And that's how I've improved, I think. But if someone presses that same button that I'm always pressing, I freak out, And so it's all in yourself. It's all in yourself. So I just wanted to add that on, because it gets weird when you're saying that it's all your responsibility, it's all a reflection of yourself. What about when someone just does something really crummy, really crummy, how is that my fault? Well, it's to a certain degree, it's not. They're responsible for what they say. They could be the type of person that are just, they're mean or whatever, and that's how they are, and that's what they say, and it's mean and it hurts. But it's still, avoid saying, I'm just, powerless against this. Whether you make a mental adjustment to not let it affect you, or make a physical adjustment of separation. And my phone started ringing. Well, I guess it'd be best to wrap it up, because this is going to be a really long video. And it's probably sloppy, because this is stuff I'm still learning about, stuff I'm still realizing, but I find it fascinating. There's other aspects of relationship, like in the past couple of years, I've experienced definite telepathy, like psychic communication with other people. There's weird stuff. This goes deep. It's one of the most profound aspects of being alive in this physical dimension is relationships. So we'll probably talk a lot about this, because this is kind of makes or breaks your experience. I think it can really enhance your life if you get good with your relationships, and it can ruin your life too. So, if we're talking about life improvement, it's something to talk about. So hopefully I'll be able to get this video up